see you again, coming to you once again from the Embroiderers Guild collection here in Sydney. With me is Deborah Ryan. She is a member of our collections team here. She's also the convener of the Fine Needlework and Lace group, which meets here at the Guild. And today we're going to be talking through some Goldwork pieces in our collection, which is one of the many styles we have here at the gallery.
Hi everyone. We've, as April mentioned, we've pulled out a few samples that we have in the collection. And one of the first ones is out of our ecclesiastical embroidery section, and it's a piece that comes from one of the founding members. I think she was a founding member, June Scott Stevenson, and she worked in 1926 at the Royal School of Needlework, which was then in London. It's now outside London. But it's a very interesting piece because it uses a variety of different styles, but basically they're all couched pieces. So a good one to begin with for someone who hasn't done Goldwork before. Each different motive has, this one's very simple and has only just a tiny little bit of couched work just to add to the sepals and the stamens in the centre of the flower. Then there's a larger flower which has used very little bit of padding around some beautiful silk shade work, padding in the centre and padding in the edge of the petal, which is beautiful, and a little bit of cross laid work over the top of that padded centre. This Maltese cross is showing exactly the method worked. I've used two pieces of gold laid together side by side and couched into place, starting from the centre and working out. So that shows very simply how that cross would be worked. This one is another interesting Embroiderers design, which shows padding, string padding, which is really lovely. And then when it's laid down vertically over the top of the padding, gives this lovely rippled effect. So it goes up and down in a different way on each row. And lastly, these little samples in the centre of the work just show furthermore a few more different types of couching techniques. So this one's couched over a string, very simply backwards and forwards, catching the gold thread on either side of the string at the base. You can do all sorts of shapes. This one's a circular shape, which looks beautiful. And the last one is sort of a basket weave design where the gold work acts as the background, and she's used a coloured thread to actually emphasise the basket weave pattern that she's working over the top of. Which is a beautiful technique. Now, couching is a commonly used technique in Goldwork. Usually it's done in a thread that matches the metal thread. So in gold, you use a gold thread, and usually a silk is preferable to anything else. It's silky and it disappears into the background. So there's several different types in the threaded needle that you can acquire for that. Generally use silver threads or a grey thread or even a white thread with the silver, or use a coloured silk thread for a coloured, something like red. They come in all sorts of different colours, the metal threads, so you obviously just use common sense depending on what you're doing, but most of the time the silk thread disappears into the background, and occasionally you use a coloured thread, as I said before.
So Deb, can you explain a bit more what couching is?
Yes, certainly. Couching basically is using two separate things. You're using the metal thread and you're using a silk thread in the case of Goldwork, for example, and so you'll lay down your gold thread, and quite often it's done in two threads together. Occasionally it's done singly, depending on what you're trying to create. If you have a look at these samples, most of them are done in a double thread. This little detail here is a single thread. And lastly, to talk about this sampler as a sample of church work or ecclesiastic work, basically it's a large area where this goldwork was used. It also in the past has been used in costume. It's probably still used in France, in Paris, for high fashion, couture fashion, and also it's used for uniforms, particularly royals and high-ranking officers.
Deb, could you tell us about these gorgeous pieces?
All right, these two pieces we pulled out of because they're so glamorous and absolutely gorgeous. We don't have a lot of history on them, but the thing that's exciting about the Guild collection is that we do have a variety of other type embroideries from other countries of origin other than just Europe. Like, for example, England, we basically have a lot of work on that it's English, Australian, Western culture basically. But we have also Oriental, Chinese, Indian, Japanese, but these two pieces come from the Middle East. So from what we can research, we can find that they're Turkish origin, and obviously they spanned out from countries to countries close by, because we found examples. April found some examples from Albania and
Macedonia as well.
Macedonia and the Balkans possibly. So they're very beautiful little waistcoats, which are a common folk costume type garment worn in those areas, and exceedingly beautiful because they're just little ones. They could either be for very small women or children because they're quite small, but they are both very similar. They're not exact copies of each other, but they're very, very similar. What we found interesting is that they have a collar and revere style, which indicated to us that they had a sort of a Western aspect to them, whereas a lot of the other samples that we could find had Mandarin collars and looked a little bit different. So we wondered if perhaps they were made for the Western market. So if anyone has any knowledge about those, we'd very gladly love to know, because we don't have a donor. They're obviously being donated quite early in the 20th century. We think they come from about 1850 onwards to early 20th century. They seem to be available. They're definitely very old because the silk lining has deteriorated, and particularly badly in both. Obviously in areas of wear. We find in the collection that pieces wear very much around the shoulders and the neckline. There's a lot of pressure from and areas that are rubbed, so the underarm and the base around the hem. So they've definitely been worn a lot, but also silk just naturally deteriorates with age faster than the wool on the outside. It's got a beautiful wool background that it's embroidered onto, and then obviously then it has the lovely silver and gold braid. So there's a heavy braid that's worked around the neckline and right the way around the hem, and in three rows of 3, and then rows of 2 around the collar and revere, and 1 row around the armhole. But the beautiful part is this lovely motive on the front that uses a braid that's been laid down in pairs with couch work that we discussed before. And then the gold one, has another twisted braid that sits on top. What's lovely about it is it also has padded work, so it's padded up with cotton or a wool in underneath, and then often today we would use a felt in a matching colour, usually yellow for gold and white for silver. Both designs have this lovely little padded like petals sitting up the top, and then they have a lovely little twisted detail around the outside. And even in amongst the work, you can see, I think it was on this one, I see it, this one has the twist around here, and then it has a twisted braid as well as the flat braid, just to create this wonderful textures on all these floral motifs. So they're all floral and very circular and curvaceous sort of designs, this lovely circular looping that's happening around the outside edge. All very typical of Middle Eastern styles. Okay, what's really lovely about this is also the details, the added little embellishments. So the tassels, which we've already looked at, but it uses the same technique as the little button or detail on the front edge. It uses a little woven Turk's head knot type of effect with a beautiful little coloured bead right in the end. Red on the gold one and blue on the silver one, which is just beautiful. Right, so the thread used in the majority of the work here, apart from the braids, looks to be applied or twisted thread used in a double row together and couched into place in a similar method to June's sample, but the gold threads used in her work seem much flatter and not twisted in nearly the same degree as the Turkish samples. In the threaded needle, we have a variety of different threads that look more like the flat threads used by June, and there's quite a variety of different colours, not only just gold, there's also coloured ones as well. So yes, you just need to come and have a look if you're interested in working some. A great way to learn about threads is to use a reference book. One we grabbed out of the threaded needle is Mary Brown's Goldwork Embroidery Design and Projects. She's a tutor at the Guild, so we thought we'd give her a plug. She has an excellent spread on equipment to be used for goldwork and the actual threads, a whole list of all the sorts of different ones that you can get in a variety of different colours as well. This one of Mary's is available in the threaded needle, but also there's an extensive selection in the library, in both the reference library and the lending library as well. So I'm going to show you how to couch a thread. We're a metal thread. We're actually using pearl, which is different to the samples that I've shown you, but it's a very common one that's used now to outline, particularly to outline and decorate other embroideries. So for multi-techniques, it's a really good one. So what you do initially is to actually just pull very gently on the pearl so that the twists open up, and that creates space for your thread to lie. So that's your first step, is just to pull it out so you can see on the end how it's very closely aligned, the twists, and then it separates. So the separated part is the part that you're going to use, and you can plug the metal thread gets plugged to the back of the work, which means you actually draw it through to the back later on. So the couching stitch is just a very simple stitch worked with another needle. Just going to lay that down with my fingers. Normally you'd be working on a frame with your outline of the piece that you're working. It's either already embroidered so that you just follow the outline, or you have an outline drawn onto the background of fabric that you're working on. Just take a little straight stitch, or it's a slightly slanted stitch, so that it just pulls up and fits into the gap there between two twists. And then you might leave a gap and do your next stitch, so it doesn't have to be through every single one. Just spaced about 2 or 3 millimeters apart, so that just a little slightly sanded stitch just to hold the pearl in place. And because it's metallic, you can curve it and shape it so that it'll follow any sort of outline. So if I do want to make a slight curve, I just shape it and curve with my fingers. You can see that thread. We used green just because we wanted you to be able to see it. So couching's very simple, and it works beautifully on the pearl because it doesn't necessarily have to show, it just disappears. Sometimes though it's decorative and you use a colour that you want to actually stand out. Really just leave it to your imagination, your designing imagination. Of course, if it's done in gold, it just disappears and you don't see it at all. When you get to the end of the length that you've stretched, you then just stretch a little bit more. I've done a little bit of gold work, mainly as decoration, not a lot. So if you're interested in doing gold work, Sharon Hutchins has a course next year, which I think is 3 or 4 sessions. So yeah, look it up. It's now in the record at the moment. Have a look, and if you're interested, go ahead and take the dive and try it.